Sarah stood in her kitchen 2 nights before her father's 60th birthday, watching 8-year-old Victoria spread her papers across the table like a tiny executive. Victoria held a purple glitter pen, rewriting her poem again and again. "Read this one," she asked softly, gripping the page so it wouldn't shake. Sarah listened while Victoria tried to sound grown, then sighed and crossed out a line. "Does Grandpa hate fake things?" Victoria asked. Sarah kept her voice steady. "Grandpa likes the truth." Victoria nodded. "I put family in it. Is that allowed?" Sarah smiled. "It's allowed. It's true." Victoria exhaled with relief and whispered, "I just want him to know I'm good." On Saturday, Sarah walked into her father's home in Columbus, where the air smelled like cake and lemon cleaner. Brenda sat proudly on the couch with her children Tyler and Mia, while their grandfather beamed at them like they were the whole world. Victoria stood beside Sarah holding her handmade card like a fragile treasure. Brenda gave Victoria a quick, polite smile, the kind you give a cashier. Sarah squeezed Victoria's shoulder. When it was time for cards, Victoria stepped forward, cheeks pink, eyes hopeful. Victoria cleared her throat and read her poem softly. "Dear Grandpa, you're 60. That's big and true. You tell stories and fix things and make pancakes too. I didn't have a grandpa before, but now I do. Thank you for my new family. I love you." The room went silent, so quiet Sarah could hear the balloons rustle. Victoria held out the card just like she'd practiced. Her grandfather snatched it too fast, his face twisting. Without reading it again, he barked, "We'll never be your family. I wish you'd stayed in the orphanage." The words cracked through the room like breaking glass. Victoria's face crumpled and the crying came out in broken gasps. Sarah rushed to her, wrapping her arms around the trembling child. "Hey, look at me. You're okay," she whispered. Victoria choked out, "I'm sorry. I'll fix it." Sarah felt something harden inside her. Victoria was already trying to shrink so others could feel comfortable. Her father sighed loudly. "Don't start," he muttered. "She needs to understand reality." Victoria whispered, "I won't call him Grandpa anymore." Sarah held her tighter and stared at her father with a calmness that felt new, strong, and final. Her father tried smoothing his voice. "Listen, I didn't mean to upset her. But I'm not pretending. She's been here 6 months. That's not family. It feels fake." Victoria flinched at the word. Brenda let out a nervous laugh, but Sarah didn't move. She rubbed circles on Victoria's back while the child shook. Her father reached for the cake knife, trying to reset the room. "Let's move on. It's my birthday." Sarah stood slowly, Victoria still pressed against her. Everyone stared, expecting her to make peace as usual. Instead she said calmly, "Since we're all being honest." Her father's eyebrows lifted like he didn't recognize this new version of Sarah. Brenda shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them as if waiting for someone to smooth the tension. Victoria pressed her face into Sarah's side, her breath shaky but slowing. Sarah picked up Victoria's small jacket from the chair and slid it gently onto her shoulders. Her father started to speak again, but Sarah raised one hand lightly. "Not today," she said. "Not like this." She took Victoria's hand and turned toward the door. No one stopped her. No one apologized. The silence behind them felt heavier than any argument. On the drive home, Victoria sat curled in the back seat, her sneakers tucked under her like she wanted to take up less space. The streetlights flickered across her face, catching the shine of her drying tears. "Mom," she whispered cautiously, as if unsure she still had the right to say the word. "Did I do something bad?" Sarah's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "No," she said softly. "You did something brave. You told the truth." Victoria swallowed hard. He said I should have stayed." She didn't finish the sentence. Sarah didn't make her. She only said, "He was wrong." They stopped at a red light and Sarah reached her hand behind her seat. Victoria grabbed 2 of her fingers immediately, clinging like she needed proof she wasn't alone. As they continued driving, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not just anger but clarity. This wasn't one moment. This was a lifetime of her father deciding who mattered and who didn't. When Sarah was 10, her mother died and the house went heavy with grief. Sarah remembered standing in the hallway as her father said, "Get your sister dressed. Make sure she eats." Laura was the baby. Sarah became the helper. That became the rhythm of their home. Laura forgot her homework. Sarah delivered it. Laura avoided chores. Sarah did them quietly. Whenever she complained, her father sighed like she was creating problems instead of carrying them. Be mature, he'd say. Don't add to my stress. By adulthood, Laura had 2 kids and endless confidence, the kind that grows when someone always catches you. Their father adored being grandpa to Tyler and Mia, showing up for games and recitals with flowers. Meanwhile, Sarah cooked family dinners, watched the kids, and made things run smoothly. Family takes care of family, he'd remind her. When her father's mortgage increased, he called Sarah late at night. I don't want to burden your sister, he said. She has enough on her plate. He paused, waiting for Sarah's old training to kick in. It did. Without hesitation, she set up a $550 auto payment to help him each month. She never told Brenda. It felt easier than conflict. It felt like being the responsible one. Again. But now, sitting in the car with Victoria's small hand wrapped around her fingers, Sarah realized the truth. She wasn't protecting her father. She had been funding her own mistreatment. Sarah's husband, Daniel, had only met her father twice before the military sent him overseas again. Daniel was calm, steady, and thoughtful, the kind of man who didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. They had tried to have children for years through tests, appointments, and disappointments that made time feel heavier. One night, Daniel appeared on a video call from a clinic overseas, exhaustion in his eyes but certainty in his voice. Sarah, he said softly, I don't want our life to be a waiting room. Sarah swallowed hard. I just wanted it to happen the normal way. Daniel shook his head gently. Normal isn't guaranteed. Love is a choice. Then he said the words that changed everything. Let's adopt. He didn't say it like a backup plan. He said it like a door opening. The next morning, Sarah printed the forms, organized a checklist, and breathed deeply. They weren't choosing easy, they were choosing theirs. When Sarah met Victoria for the first time in a beige office room, the little girl sat curled in a chair with a stuffed fox missing an ear. Her eyes watched everything closely like she was measuring the room for exits. When the caseworker introduced them, Victoria didn't smile. She simply whispered, Do you have rules? Sarah knelt so she wasn't towering over her. Yes, she said gently, but we talk about them. On Victoria's first night at their home, she lined her shoes neatly by the door. On the second night, she asked timidly, Am I allowed to open the fridge? By the third week, she politely corrected Sarah when she used a nickname instead of her full name. And at month 4, Victoria slipped and called her mom at the grocery store, then froze like she'd broken a law. Sarah didn't make it awkward. She simply smiled and said, Yep, that's me, and kept walking. That moment shifted something in Victoria. She began relaxing, laughing more, humming while she drew. Meanwhile, the adoption paperwork moved slowly, the court date still far off. Sarah had hoped her father would come around once he saw Victoria was just a child who wanted to belong. But he didn't soften. When Sarah first told him they were adopting, he didn't ask about Victoria. He asked, Why would you do that to yourself? Sarah stared at him, stunned. She's a child, not a punishment. Her father scoffed. You're bringing a stranger into your home. If you can't have kids naturally, maybe that's your sign. Don't force something that isn't meant to be. The words hit Sarah like a cold wind. Daniel, listening through speakerphone from overseas, kept his voice steady. Sir, we're excited. Her father snapped, Don't sir me. You don't understand this family. Then he added the line that lodged in Sarah's chest, Don't expect me to play grandpa. Don't push it. Still, Sarah invited him to his birthday party anyway, holding on to the naive hope that time might change him. Back in that crowded living room, as Victoria's cries slowly weakened, Sarah realized how wrong she had been to expect kindness. Brenda hovered in the kitchen doorway, torn between discomfort and loyalty. Tyler and Mia stared at the floor. No one defended Victoria, not one adult. Sarah tightened her arm around the little girl, grounding her softly. Her father tried to move things along with forced cheer. Let's get cake, he said loudly. No need to drag this out. But Sarah wasn't smoothing over anything anymore. She turned to him, calm and steady. You want honesty? Here it is. She spoke clearly so every adult could hear. Victoria is my daughter. I love her more than anything. If you can't see her as family, then I am no longer your family either. The words dropped into the room like weight. Brenda's eyes widened. Sarah, Come on. Sarah shook her head. Not today. Her father blinked, stunned, as if unable to process a boundary that didn't bend. Sarah picked up Victoria's handmade card from the table, creased now from his grip, and slipped it into her purse like something precious. Then she walked out, holding Victoria close. No one followed. At home, Sarah changed Victoria into pajamas and made her warm milk with honey, the same comfort Sarah's mother used to make before she passed. Victoria sat on the edge of her bed, twisting her shirt hem. "Did I break your family?" she asked in a small, fearful voice. "If I did, I can fix it. I can say sorry. I can stop writing poems." Tears gathered in her eyes. "If poems make people mad, I won't write poems anymore." Sarah sat beside her, keeping her voice calm. "You didn't break anything. Adults are responsible for adult choices. Not you." Victoria shook her head fiercely. "But he said I shouldn't be here. He said I should have stayed where I was." Her voice cracked. "What if you change your mind?" Sarah took her small hands, steadying them. "Victoria," she said softly, "I have never been more sure of anything. You're my daughter. You are staying." She pointed to a small photo on Victoria's dresser, the one Victoria chose of the two of them smiling outside the library. "That's us. That's real." Victoria sniffed. "Then my poem wasn't bad?" Sarah shook her head. "Your poem was love. The problem was him." After putting Victoria to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen counter and opened her laptop. She stared at the screen displaying the monthly auto payment to her father's mortgage, $550 withdrawn like clockwork. She realized how many years she'd been quietly supporting him while he tore down everything she built. Without hesitation, she clicked cancel. The system asked, "Are you sure?" She pressed confirm. No drama. No fireworks. Just freedom. Then she transferred the same amount into a savings account labeled Victoria's Future. That money belonged to her daughter, not her father's comfort. Sunday mornings had always been automatic. Brenda dropping her kids at Sarah's door, Sarah cooking, supervising, and shuttling everyone to their father's house while he called it tradition. But the first Sunday after the birthday incident, Sarah woke to a quiet home. She made pancakes for Victoria, who giggled when she flipped one too high. At 9:07 a.m. Brenda texted, "Be there in 20. We're doing brunch later." Sarah stared at the message. Her hands wanted to fall into old habits. Instead she typed, "We're not doing Sundays anymore. Please make other childcare plans." And she hit send. The reply came fast, "Are you kidding? Dad already feels bad. Don't punish the kids. We have plans." Sarah didn't argue. She placed her phone face down and helped Victoria find her blue crayon. A boundary didn't need a speech. It needed consistency. 5 minutes later Brenda called. Sarah answered, not to fight but to be clear. "What is wrong with you?" Brenda snapped. Sarah kept her tone calm. "I'm not babysitting today." Brenda scoffed. "Dad said something stupid. He's old. He apologized." Sarah blinked slowly. "No, he didn't." Brenda huffed loudly. "You're making this weird. We're family." Sarah cut in gently. "Brenda, I'm protecting my daughter." Brenda's voice sharpened. "Protecting her from what?" "A comment." She lowered her volume like she was being reasonable. "You're blowing everything up. You can't just cut Dad out." Sarah didn't waver. "I can. And I am." Brenda sputtered. "So what now? You're keeping her from Dad forever? That's insane. And what about me? What am I supposed to do today?" Sarah replied, "You're supposed to parent your kids." There was a long silence. Then Brenda whispered coldly, "Wow. You've changed." Sarah answered, "Yes. I have." And she hung up. Her father didn't call. He texted like a man who assumed money was still a button he could press. The mortgage payment didn't go through. Fix it tonight. No hello. No mention of Victoria. Just an order. Sarah stared at the message until her jaw eased. Then she replied simply, "I canceled the payment. I won't be supporting your mortgage anymore." The typing bubbles appeared immediately. "Unbelievable after everything I did for you. Then you're letting your feelings control you." And then the one that made Sarah go still inside. "Don't act like that girl is your family yet." Her father had turned Victoria into a temporary object again, something conditional, something that could be revoked. He said it like paperwork erased bedtime stories, inside jokes, and the way Victoria clung to her hand. Sarah typed back, "Do not speak about my daughter again." Then she walked outside, unblocked his number long enough to call, and went straight to voicemail. She left no message. He didn't need to. By the afternoon the relatives started. A cousin she hadn't spoken to in months called first. "Your father is heartbroken," the cousin said. Sarah answered calmly, "He told my child she belonged in an orphanage." Her cousin sighed dramatically. "He didn't mean it like that. He's old-fashioned." Sarah closed her eyes. Old-fashioned isn't an excuse to be cruel. The cousin continued, "Blood matters, Sarah. You know that." Then came the part that made Sarah's chest go cold. "If this is too stressful, maybe you should reconsider. Maybe the girl would be better somewhere else." Sarah's voice flattened. "Don't ever suggest that again. Victoria is my daughter. Not a trial run." The cousin stumbled over an apology, but Sarah ended the call and blocked the number. She did the same to 2 more relatives that day. By the next week, a quiet rhythm settled over their home. Victoria stopped watching Sarah's face every time the phone buzzed. She left her shoes wherever she wanted instead of lining them up fearfully by the door. On Sunday mornings, Sarah and Victoria went to the library together. Victoria carried a bright yellow poetry book around like a trophy. Daniel called whenever he could, and for the first time, Sarah told him the full truth instead of smoothing everything over. "It's quiet," she said. "It's better." Daniel didn't question her boundaries. He only asked, "What do you need?" Some days she needed him just to listen. Some days she needed him to email the adoption worker so she didn't have to make every decision alone. One night, Victoria taped her poem, the very same poem her grandfather rejected, to the fridge with a strawberry magnet. "It's still true," Victoria said simply. Sarah rested her hand on her shoulder. "It is." For a month life stayed steady, peaceful. Then one Tuesday afternoon that peace shattered. Sarah waited in the school pickup line as usual. 10 minutes passed. 20. No Victoria. Her stomach tightened. She parked and walked quickly into the office. The secretary smiled politely. "Oh, Victoria was already picked up," she said. "Her grandfather came in early." Sarah's voice vanished for half a second. "Excuse me." She moved to the clipboard the secretary pointed at. There, in her own handwriting from months ago, sat her father's name, the one she hadn't removed yet. Her hands went cold. "What time did he take her?" "About 15 minutes ago," the secretary said cheerfully, unaware of the panic rising in Sarah's chest. Sarah swallowed hard. "Remove him immediately. He is not allowed." The secretary blinked, startled, and began typing fast. Sarah walked outside with her pulse thudding in her ears and dialed her father. Straight to voicemail. He called Brenda. No answer. Finally, she called Daniel, and the moment he picked up she said, "He took her from school." Daniel didn't ask for details. "Drive," he instructed, voice steady. "I'm staying on the line." Sarah drove like every red light was personal. When she reached her father's house, the driveway was full. Brenda's SUV, her father's sedan, 2 small bikes tossed on the lawn. Sarah didn't knock. She rang the bell once and pushed the door open. Brenda appeared in the hallway with her arms crossed, already shaping her face into irritation. "Sarah, what are you doing?" she demanded. Sarah walked past her without answering. In the living room, Victoria sat stiffly on the carpet, her hands folded in her lap like she'd been coached to stay still. Her father rolled a rubber ball toward her, forcing a smile. "Come on, sweetheart," he said. "Grandpa's just playing." Victoria didn't reach for the ball. The moment she saw Sarah, her whole body shifted. She stood up fast, crossed the room, and grabbed Sarah's hand like a lifeline. Sarah wrapped an arm around her, feeling how tense her body was, like she'd held herself still on purpose. She looked at her father and said calmly, "You took my child from school without telling me." Her voice landed cold and official like paperwork. Daniel's voice murmured through Sarah's phone, still on the call, steady and present. Her father lifted his hands like he was the one defusing chaos. "Sarah, relax. I'm trying to make things right," he insisted. "I've decided I'm ready to be her grandfather now." He smiled at Victoria, expecting gratitude she didn't owe him. Victoria clung tighter. Sarah angled herself slightly in front of her. "You don't get to be ready by taking her," she said. Brenda rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Sarah. He picked her up. It's not like he... Stop, Sarah said quietly. You do not take my child. Ever. Her father's smile faltered. I was going to call you, he said. I thought you'd cooled off by now. I need things to go back to normal. He said the word normal like it had ever been healthy. Then he sighed. And you can't just cut off the mortgage payment. And there was. Not Victoria. Not her feelings. Not the pain he caused. His concern wasn't family, it was control. Sarah nodded once as if something had just been confirmed. That's why you won't have access to her, she said. You don't love her. You want leverage. She took Victoria's backpack from the chair and held her hand firmly. They walked to the door. Behind her, her father's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. Sarah, he called like her name was a command he could still use. But Sarah kept walking. The spell was broken. Normal was finished. 6 months later, Sarah, Daniel, and Victoria sat in a quiet courthouse room. Daniel had come home early from his overseas posting, now working at a local clinic. He wore a suit that still felt strange on him, but his hand was warm in Sarah's. Victoria wore a simple dress and held her stuffed fox, its once torn ear now neatly stitched because Daniel had fixed it like a real doctor. The judge smiled kindly at Victoria. Do you understand what today means? Victoria nodded hard. It means I'm staying, she said, then glanced at Sarah. Forever. The judge chuckled softly and stamped the paperwork. The sound of the stamp landing on the page felt like something clicking into place, a door locking from the inside. Victoria leaned into Sarah's side, relief softening her whole body. Daniel squeezed Sarah's hand and for the first time in months she felt her chest loosen. They walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunlight. Victoria lifted her face toward it like she hadn't felt sun in days. Can we get pancakes today? She asked. Sarah laughed. We can get pancakes every day if you want. At home life fell into a new rhythm. Victoria wrote poems again, about pancakes, school buses and the dog stealing socks. Sometimes she wrote about family and the word didn't tremble anymore. The strawberry magnet still held her original poem on the fridge, creases and all. Sarah left it there on purpose. Some words deserved to stay. Daniel started teaching Victoria easy science tricks and she followed him around asking questions, the kind kids only ask when they feel safe. Sarah watched them and felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Peace without fear of it being taken away. Sarah didn't hear from her father or Brenda again. A distant cousin mentioned that her father had to downsize his home and cancel 2 vacations he'd planned. Now he complained to anyone who would listen about how ungrateful Sarah was. Sarah didn't flinch. Complaints didn't reach her porch anymore. She no longer lived her life in reaction to him. She no longer shrank herself to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it. She had a daughter now, a child who needed softness, safety and truth, not the cold rules Sarah grew up with. One quiet evening, Victoria sat on the living room rug, writing something with fierce concentration. Sarah watched from the couch. What are you working on? She asked. Victoria grinned shyly. A poem, she said. It's about us. She handed Sarah the page. In wobbly handwriting it read, Family is not who you start with. Family is who stays. Sarah felt her throat tighten but she didn't hide it. Victoria leaned gently against her. Is it good? She asked. Sarah kissed the top of her head. It's perfect, she whispered. It's real. Later that night, Victoria asked the question Sarah had been waiting for. Mom, are we done with them? Forever. Sarah thought for a moment and answered honestly, We're done with anyone who hurts you. Victoria nodded, satisfied. She curled up beside Sarah on the couch, her stuffed fox tucked under her arm. Outside the world was quiet. Inside the house felt like a place built from new walls, ones that locked from the inside not to keep love out but to keep it safe. And as Sarah held her daughter close, she knew one truth. They weren't missing a family. They had finally made one.